I've told this to many, many people. Brains are a commodity, right? I can buy brains. You don't ever let anyone say the best part of your skill set are your brains, because you can hire the smartest lawyer, the smartest banker, the smartest architect, the smartest engineer, the smartest accountant. Brains are a commodity. They're absolutely for sale. What else do you got is the thing that we look for with people, and I know you do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, you won't know that if those people aren't in the office. You won't know that if you don't randomly take someone out for lunch and talk to them about what else they're doing. Yes, they can run an Excel spreadsheet. Yes, they did a great job at a model. Yes, they did a great job at a pitch book. But that's not the difference between success and failure.
One path is a long, winding, unpaved, back-breaking, bumpy, miserable road to a place called success. The other road is straight, paved, smooth, comfortable, and that road ends up in a place called failure. Welcome to the show. I am Kyle Matthews on the Matthews Mentality Podcast, where we dive into the mindset of the world's most driven founders, CEOs, business moguls, athletes, and entrepreneurs. Each episode will turn our guests' wisdom into practical advice that will help you build a deeper understanding of what led them to success and the mentality behind what got them there. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of the Matthews Mentality Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Matthews, and sitting here with me is a longtime friend of mine, Mr. Dan Hurwitz. Dan, thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
Appreciate you coming out. Now, I'm going to start, as I always do, I'm going to read your bio, and you have accomplished a lot, so I'm going to actually have to skip over some parts, but I'm going to read the bio because it's important for the audience to understand who we're talking to, how much you've accomplished, the experience, and I'm just going to dive in, all right?
Sounds good.
All right. Daniel B. Hurwitz is the co-founder and CEO of Raider Hill Advisors. He has spent over 35 years navigating all aspects of the real estate industry. Prior to Raider Hill, Mr. Hurwitz held a variety of positions in the retail and real estate sectors dating back to 1986, most recently during a 16-year tenure at DDR Corp., now known as Site Centers, a publicly traded company. Mr. Hurwitz led numerous departments beginning with leasing development in 1999 and culminating with the responsibility of reviving the company in the post-recession era as CEO, commencing in 2010. That's about the time I met you, Dan. Mr. Hurwitz served as interim CEO of Brixmor Property Group, another publicly traded REIT, from February 2016 to May 2016. Prior to joining DDR, Mr. Hurwitz served as Senior Vice President, Director of Real Estate and Corporate Development for Boscov's Department Store. Dan, he graduated of Colgate University and the Wharton School of Business Management program at the University of Pennsylvania. Frequent speaker at real estate industry functions. You definitely are a frequent speaker. Repeatedly been a guest discussing retail and real estate trends on CNBC, Bloomberg TV, Fox Business. Professionally, Dan is a member of the board of directors of WeWork and serves as chair of the audit committee. He's also currently a member of the board of directors of Brixmor Property Group and service provider Ideal Dental. Dan serves as an advisor to the board of directors for Edens and Shopcore Properties. Previously, Dan, you had served, I think it was 2019, 2020, as chairman of ICSC, member of the board of directors of GGP from 2013 to 2018, serving as lead director and chair of the special committee advising on the sale of the company to affiliates of Brookfield Asset Management. Additionally, you've served on the NAREIT Executive Board of Governors, Governments Committee, Board of Directors of DDR, CubeSmart, Sone Sierra Brazil. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Excellent. My Portuguese is on point. And Boscov's Department Store. Outside of the real estate sector, Mr. Hurwitz is Chairman Emeritus of Colgate University Board of Trustees and football alum. Dan, I have been looking forward to this for quite some time. I can't thank you enough for coming to Nashville. I'm happy to have you. I'm happy to have you. I was saying the last time we were in Nashville together, it was, I believe, February 28th, 2020. It was the open air conference.
Right at the end.
I think you and I had a private dinner with 6-7 other folks. I think the chief economist of Blackstone was there, and they had just revised public earnings guidance from 10% down to 0. And, none of us knew what was coming, but it was the first conference I remember, dapping people up with a fist instead of a handshake. And it's kind of like, what's up with that, But a lot has happened in the last 3 years, right?
Well, a lot has happened, and I just remember that particular conference because there's this sort of pending doom coming with COVID, and there was 500-600 people there, and there was one little bottle of Purell on the table, and they were recommending that people use the Purell.
Yeah.
And for 500 or 600 people, they had one little bottle of Purell on the table.
Not enough. Well, we over the next years we got familiar with the Purell. I just remember thinking, like, I went to stick out my hand to shake it. It was someone's like, well, I prefer to do a fist bump or a thing.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with that guy? But then little did I know, but here we are in Nashville 3 years later. I wanted to mention something to you. I don't think I've ever told you this story. You're one of the reasons I moved from Los Angeles. So I was in New York. This was probably 2018. Myself, some of my teammates were at your office. I'd flown in late the night before from LA. I'm on Pacific time zone. And I had an early breakfast, and so if I'm going to make an excuse, there it is. But I had a meeting at your office. I think it was like 9:30, and I was meeting with you and Joe. And I was sitting there. We were talking. I think we were working through a portfolio sale for you at the time. And I was low energy, admittedly. And you've never been shy to be candid.
Which is not like you to be low energy.
That's right. So, and you've always been candid, good and bad, which I've always had gratitude for. And you kind of halfway through me, like, you all right, Kyle? I go, yeah, why? You go, you seem kind of sleepy. It's not a good look for you. And I was sitting there, I was like, oh my God, man, that's not good. And I just said to myself, I was flying home, I said, I'm coming to New York so often. I'm going to Chicago and, South Florida, Dallas, Atlanta, in addition to the West Coast. And it was like that 3-hour time zone. And I knew the company was getting bigger, travel was only getting worse. And I said, I can't live in LA. And it was part of the reason, but I reference that story a lot. So I appreciate you. I appreciate kicking me in the ass and getting me out of there.
Well, you were growing a business, and it's very hard to grow a business flying coast to coast on a regular basis, and your business is transactional. And it's all relationship driven.
I was going to say it's all relationship.
That's relationship driven.
Which means I got to get in front of you guys.
You got to get in front of people, and you got to get on a plane. You got to go do it, and then on top of that, you got a family, and you got other things to do, and you were exhausted.
I was tired.
You were exhausted, and a young man like yourself should not have been low energy.
No, I was low. I remember you looked at me like, not a good look.
Not a good look.
So anyway, the feedback was appreciated. So what are you up to today? Where are you spending your time? What's keeping you busy?
Well, at Raider Hill, we have a variety of different clients and different services that we provide those clients, and we try to get involved in a lot of different things, whether it be the open air business, the mall business. We do some direct investing with partners. We do advisory work. We've started a new ESG division because it's a hot topic, and it's actually a service we hadn't provided clients in the past that they've asked us for. The funny thing about things like ESG is that everybody who's talking about ESG had a full-time job before ESG came on board. And now all of a sudden they have to spend all this time on ESG, and they look at you as an advisor and they say, can you help me with this? Because I had a job before I had to deal with this. So we started a division in ESG, and we just try to stay in the business. We like to know what's going on. We stay active and current and try to provide the service that our clients need to mitigate risk and maximize value. And we say that, and it sort of rolls off the tongue to some extent, but the truth is that's our only job.
You're based out of Manhattan, New York.
We're in New York.
Been at your office, grinding.
Yeah.
Professional dress in the office. Is that's important to you?
It is. We're back in the office. We don't have work from home schedule. Although we do have flex time. I tell that we're very early on flex time. You can work any 90 hours a week you'd like.
I remember that.
But we do have people. We're in the office. We're in the office daily. We think it's important, particularly, we saw an interesting thing occur during COVID. The class of analysts that came in the year before COVID advanced much quicker than the class that came in during COVID. So the ones that were in the office before we all were dismissed really were moving along at a faster pace than the ones that came in and then immediately worked from home for a year. And as a result of that, it really opened our eyes to the importance of being in the office, the importance of mentorship, the importance of people walking by and saying, what are you working on? And do you have any questions? And what's going on? And we thought that we didn't really do it for us, having people in the office, as much as we were doing it for the others, the people who are trying to grow, because we're helping them get better.
So generally speaking, the younger professionals.
Yeah. The younger analysts who are trying to fight their way to the top and get there, they're not going to get there if there isn't a significant exposure to different things at different times, not just running spreadsheets or doing models and because you were asked to do them. It's the intangibles that you pick up in an office that we think is very important. So we were back early in the office, and I'm glad we did it.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying, hey, if you've been in the business 25 years, working from the office, even then, I think we'd both argue there's value, there's a benefit, but they could very much get away with being productive and a high level of execution or whatever their assignment is. Being at home, it's those, 1, 2, 3, 5 years into their career.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, individual assignments, I've told this to many, many people. Brains are a commodity. Right? I can buy brains. You don't ever let anyone say the best part of your skill set are your brains, because you can hire the smartest lawyer, the smartest banker, the smartest architect, the smartest engineer, the smartest accountant. Brains are a commodity. They're absolutely for sale. What else do you got is the thing that we look for with people, and I know you do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, you won't know that if those people aren't in the office. You won't know that if you don't randomly take someone out for lunch and talk to them about what else they're doing. Yes, they can run an Excel spreadsheet. Yes, they did a great job at a model. Yes, they did a great job at a pitch book. But that's not the difference between success and failure. The difference between success and failure are going to be all the other things that are not a commodity that you have and that you possess. And what you really want is people to see that. And people can't see that on Zoom, and they're not going to see that at home.
Yeah, we talk about here is, mindsets over skill sets, IQ. Oftentimes, perhaps you can teach someone how to run a model. Now, there's people who might be better than others. You can teach someone the skill set of whatever the profession is. The mindset, it's not so much you can't teach it. And if you're not around them, you can't see it or feel it either. And your buddy Don Wood was on a week ago, and he was talking about EQ over IQ.
Yeah.
Right. We were even touching on AI, very much not replacing, but competing with IQ. But EQ, it's not there. So.
Well, IQ is interesting. We don't. Everyone that we do business with has a high IQ.
Yeah.
We're not. There's no lack of brains. That's actually what makes it a commodity. EQ is special.
I agree.
And if you have that skill, you must continually put yourself in a position to use it.
So was it tough? Was it a challenge getting people back in the office? I know New York was where COVID hit the hardest, and I'm sure many of the folks who work with you had a direct 1 degree of separation from someone who was significantly impacted. Was that a challenge to get them to see that value of being in the office?
It really wasn't, and I think that's more indicative of who we hire than New York in general. I mean, everyone in our office at one point in time had COVID, right? Whether it was before they came back or after everyone came back, including myself. We all got it at one point in time.
Yeah.
But coming back into the office, most of the people in our office were anxious to get back and get to work. There were some people that had some concerns, and those are fair concerns. I mean, that's okay, but that's not the rules. I mean, I get it. It's not the rules. I mean, I had great respect for the people who expressed concern about that, and but the rules were they had to come back to work.
What are some of the biggest challenges you're facing today at Raider Hill?
I think probably our staff right now and our team that we have has been with us a while and really in very good shape. I mean, I feel very, very fortunate to be working with the people. We have a lot of continuity both at the senior level and the junior levels. So I think that's been great. I think probably the biggest challenge we have is just the environment in which we're trying to operate. It's just really, really hard right now in the real estate sector.
It is,
and
Jeez, tell me about it.
Yeah, as you know, and it's really hard. And people, And if you've been working in real estate for really less than 8 years, you've never been through a recession. You've never been through tough times.
Yeah,
And
COVID was a stop-start.
that was an event. It wasn't a process. Now we're into a process, and the process is a sort of a downward process, and so things were very, very good. They were good for a very long time.
I thought we were good. It was the market?
Well, never confuse brains with a bull market. Very, very important.
Fair play.
Never confuse brains with a bull market. And so the people who have never experienced a down market before worry. They worry a lot. But those of us who have been around for almost 4 decades, I mean, like I said, we talked about earlier, we have a 100-year flood every 10 years in our business.
Yeah, I love that line.
And we do. And we'll muscle our way through it. It's not going to be a great year. Next year might not be a great year either. That's okay, because the 2 prior years were actually quite good. And that's just the nature of the business.
I think it's been 3 black swan events in the last 15 years. The GFC was a black swan. COVID was a black swan. Whatever you want to call them, raising rates 450 basis points in 11 months, a black swan.
Yeah.
Turns out black swans are actually very common, right?
Very common, yeah.
We'll get to dive deeper into the challenges. We'll talk a little later in the show about the economy, real estate, and where it is today. I actually wanted to focus on you. I mean, you're still going hard even after all these years, and I know you would never say this, so I'll say it for you, is like you have achieved so much success, okay? Professionally speaking, so much success. What drives you to grind the way you do still?
Well, I'm having fun. One of the things that's happened in the business is that as I've grown through the industry, you find yourself having to do business with a lot of people you don't like, and working with a lot of people that you don't like, or in some you don't even respect. But as you get older and you can call your own shots a little bit more, you really only do business with people you like, and you work with people you like, and it's a lot of fun. It's a blessing in many ways. So as I get up to go to work every day, I'm working with people that I like. Our clients are people that I like. We do say no to people on a fairly regular basis, not because they're bad people. It's just that they're not a good cultural fit for us. And I don't need that aggravation at this stage of our life. And it's quite frankly not even a good lesson for the younger people, because some of those relationships can be very, very difficult. So over the course of a 40-year career or close to it, you have a lot of negatives and a lot of positives. So when you get to this later stage, you really focus on the positives, and it's a lot of fun.
Right. So motivation now is like, hey, I'm having fun. Again, these are my words, not yours. Probably wasn't always the case. How have your motivations changed over the years looking back at your career?
Well,
your drivers.
They've changed a lot. I mean, at the beginning of the career, you're just trying to get noticed. You're just trying to just grind and hope that someone remembers your name. I remember back in the late 80s when I'd go to a Vegas conference and I would go to the men's room. I was just hoping that I'd walk down the hall and someone would say, "Hi, Dan." And no one ever did. It took many, many years.
Because it provide validation that you were doing something right.
That they remembered me. Giving people a reason to remember you, that the way you did business with them, the fact that you had dinner and had a good time, whatever it might be.
There's affirmation in that.
But so motivation changes. You go from wanting to be recognized actually to wanting to hide a little bit, and that's a sign of achievement to some extent. But my motivation now is I've always liked to build things. It's really fun to build. My first job out of college was on a construction site. I really felt that even the work that I did as CEO of DDR, the stock price had gone from $66 to $1.54. I became CEO. We were able to build a company back.
Yeah, I should have bought.
And we were able to build a company back over a 5-year period of time. And you really were building things. I'm not a great cheerleader. I'm not a great just maintenance person.
Yeah.
I like to build things, and even the challenges that I've had elsewhere when Brixmor had its issues, and I went in as the interim CEO at Brixmor before the tremendous job that Jim Taylor's doing there now. But that was just building something back. So I enjoy building. I enjoy fixing. But I'm not good at maintenance. Just sort of watching and cheering and slapping people on the back, and I get reckless, and I get restless.
You're a football guy. You got to be in the huddle.
I get restless, and I need a project.
Yeah.
I need a project, and Raider Hill for me has been a project, because Joe and I started the company. My partner Joe Tishar and I started the company, and we were two people in a Regis office, waiting for the phone to ring.
It was fun though, right?
And it was fun. It was filthy, by the way. The office.
That was Joe.
The office is disgusting.
Sounds like Joe, right?
No, Joe. The office is.
Joe's the most put together guy I know.
I know. He's pretty put together.
I don't think I've ever seen his hair messed up. I'll mess up his hair next time I see him.
But that's so building things and getting up and driving and moving something forward, as opposed to just maintaining.
So I asked you the question, how have your motivations changed? You answered it, but let me take it even further back and convert the question to how is your mindset or mentality? Like as a kid, were you always driven? Were you always into building things? Were you always this high achiever who was just, I mean, you're an intense guy, right? And were you always like that? If I were to ask somebody who knew you as a kid, would they say, oh, Dan, I always knew he was going to be this? Or was it something that maybe was unlocked or uncovered by you? Like, how would you describe yourself when you were younger?
That's an interesting question, because I was the youngest grandchild in our family. When we go to my grandparents' house, they would always go around the table and they'd talk about my brother, who's absolutely brilliant. And my grandfather would always used to say, my brother's he's an author.
An author, that's right.
Yeah, my brother's a very accomplished author, and he's absolutely brilliant. And they'd go around and they'd talk about, how's everyone doing at school? And my brother was always doing great, and my cousins, of course, were perfect and stuff. And they'd always get to me, and I was least likely to succeed in the family for sure. I was the youngest grandchild. I was a bit of a pest. My mother, would say I was an itch. All the time, because I was just doing stuff. So I don't know the answer. Like my family, I don't think would have thought that I was particularly driven. In fact, if my father were here today, may he rest in peace, he probably would tell you I was the one he was most concerned about. But it works out, and sports has part to do with that. Being an ex-athlete and competing and wanting to win. And having the sense that other people are relying on you, and that was all very important to me, being part of a team and wanting to help others be successful. So that's a real motivating factor in my life, and sports has been a big impact.
In both I'm just going to ask about high school, your high school academic, high school football. Was it something where you were just naturally good and you relied on natural talent, or were you? Was it a combination, or were you maybe not as talented, but you were just so driven and so locked in discipline?
Yeah, I was not the most talented, so it was more driven. I remember very clearly my freshman football coach in high school telling me that I would probably never play varsity football at that school.
How'd that make you feel?
And that was. Not only, I thought he was a senile old goat anyway, so I didn't take him all that seriously. But at the same time, it woke up the country club a little bit.
Yeah.
You realize that I'm going to show them something, and then I ended up doing fine. And then the same thing in college. When you go to college, you're good in high school, but when you go to college, everyone's good.
Oh, tell me about it.
And you walk on that field, and it could have. And again, I was by far not one of the better players. In fact, I was lucky to be there. But at the same time, I was an important part of the team, and I was able to carve a niche for myself. And that's kind of what I've tried to do, either carve a niche for myself academically or athletically or professionally. Not something that I can necessarily follow in someone else's path. Because, if you follow in someone else's footsteps, you know where it leads. I kind of like to create my own. And I made a lot of decisions that were contrary to what other people would have done, primarily because I wanted to go my own way.
I'm not focusing on your football career just because it's football. I get that that people could draw a straight line from that. But how would you describe your game as a player in football? I'll lead you here a little bit. Was it you were a tactician? Was it you were just more relentless and kind of nasty? What, like, because then I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Like, would you say that was also how maybe someone would describe you professionally?
Well, I hope they wouldn't. I hope nasty doesn't come to
Well,
mind.
Like nasty in football is like would never
No.
quit, play to the very end of the play until the whistle stop guy, like just relentless.
No, I tried to be very technical because, quite frankly, I wasn't a good enough athlete not to be.
Okay.
Sometimes people have to be very technically competent. Your foot movement has to be right. Your hand movement has to be right. You have to watch a lot of film. You have to understand who you're playing against because 90% of the time that person's better than you. That's how I was. I felt that 90% of the time the person I was playing against was going to be better than me, so I had to work harder. I would take a swing at someone every now and then. I was an offensive lineman, so that's what happens.
And protect your quarterback.
Yeah, you have to do those sort of things, but it was never relying on athletic ability because I really didn't have very much.
Colgate. Why Colgate? Great school. I love the Colgate guys you send us. They're studs. But just walk us through how you ended up there.
Well, I had a great coach in high school, and I was being recruited by a lot of great schools. And as I started my trips, I remember he said to me, you're going to go on these campuses, and you're going to have these long weekends, and they're going to put you with the football players, and you're going to have a great time. He said, but ignore that, and look around the campus, because you're one injury away from being one of the other people, not the people you're staying with. And don't go to a school where you don't like the other people, because that might be you. This is back in the days when you didn't have a portal, right? So there wasn't a lot of transferring and anything like that.
No portal.
And I had done a bunch of different trips, and I was fortunate enough to do a few trips to schools I didn't like. And then when I went up to Colgate, I loved it. I mean, it was like...
you love Colgate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've known that about you since the time.
Well, it was good. It was very good to me, and the school did a lot for me.
You've been very good for the school.
Yeah, well,
I think there's a building named after you, right?
But you got to give back, and they've done a lot for me, and Colgate did a lot for me. But I went up for my recruit weekend, and it just felt like home.
I'm surprised I haven't seen a Dan Hurwitz NIL collective yet, so you can buy some of the athletes. Let's get started. We'll go to dinner tonight. We'll talk about it. All right, so you're at Colgate. You graduated. Did you? I think you said your first job was in construction. So I was going to ask, did you go straight into real estate? Like, walk us through your career at the beginning.
So coming out of Colgate in the mid '80s, a lot of people, don't forget, it was the go-go '80s, right? Everything was great. This was before the crash, the first crash.
Reagan.
And it was
first crash. You mean the savings?
The stock market crash.
Stock market crash. 87.
And we had it was not hard to get a job coming out of Colgate back in those days because you had 650 kids in a graduating class, you had 300 go to professional school, and you had over 100 companies come interview on campus. So you had a bunch of jobs. And I had sort of the Wall Street jobs that people were looking for, but I didn't like any of the people that I knew that were taking those jobs. And I was pretty comfortable that I wasn't going to like it. So I had done an internship with a real estate company, and they had offered me a job, and so I took it.
Oh, there's no real estate in the family?
No.
It wasn't a family business?
It was not a family business. It was a gentleman that ran a mall company out of New York. His daughter actually did a visiting semester at school, and I met her. And my father, he mentioned to my father, he knew my dad, and mentioned to my dad that his daughter was going to be there. So I made sure she had a good semester. He offered me an internship, and I got to know him. And then he offered me a job. And I remember very clearly, I had all these other job offers from the Wall Street firms, and I went to see him. I said, what are you going to pay me? And he looked at me. He said, if you're so stupid to take your first job based on what you're going to make, then you're not smart enough to work here.
What was the name
and
of the
I
company?
Said, the name of the company was Shopco. It's a SHOPCO group. And I looked at him and I was like, I'll take it. I'll never forget it.
And then you said, no, seriously, though, what are you going to pay me?
And I didn't know. He wouldn't tell me until I got my first check, and it was $227 a week. I'll never forget it. Which, by the way, was $170 a week more than I was living on in college.
I was
So
gonna
I thought
say,
I thought I was rich.
You probably
But he
were,
just
yeah.
looked at me right in the eye and he said, if you're going to take the first job out of college based on money and not opportunity, then you're just not smart enough.
You know, we'll talk later about mentorship. I know it's such a huge part of your leadership, your mentoring, how you run your company. I know you've mentioned mentorship so many times over the years. Probably every time I've met you, the word mentor in some ways has come up. It's amazing how at times throughout our lives, especially just professionally speaking, somebody will say something to you, to me, or to anyone, and he probably wouldn't even remember that. But for you, that was, I mean, you remember it to this day.
It was impactful. I mean, he just looked me right in the eye, and it was, and he was right. I mean, he couldn't argue with it, right? I mean, what difference did it make whether I was going to make $227 a week or $350 a week or $500 a week? At that point in my life, it really didn't matter. It is all about opportunity.
And what was the right opportunity for you?
And that was the right opportunity. But just the challenge that he put in front of me, the way he did it, I mean, I just sort of had to take the job.
So talk to us about the challenge of so many people coming out of the workforce, coming out of college today, entering the workforce, sometimes maybe even mismessaged in terms of what their expectations should be as to relating to, we touch on work-life balance, but really like their career, building a career, building wealth. Walk us through those first couple years in your career, what you were working on, what your day-to-day looked like. You could touch on your work-life balance or that lack thereof. Just kind of tell us what a day in the life of Dan Hurwitz back then looked like.
Well, back then, you know, I showed up for my first day in New York because I thought I was going to be working at the company in New York, and they sent me to Westminster, Maryland to build a mall. And I really was what they call a clerk of the works. So I had this fancy education, and all I really had to do was be able to count the number of workers that each trade had on the job to make sure we weren't being overbilled. It really wasn't, there was nothing intellectual about it at all, nothing glamorous. You know, working in a construction trailer versus Wall Street, most of the people thought I was totally crazy. But I loved it. It was great. You know, you had to deal with all the different contractors. It was a construction job like that is a melting pot. And I worked 18, 19 hours a day because I didn't know what I was doing. You know, the truth is I was a history major from a liberal arts college, and I'm on a construction site, and I had never been on a construction site before. I mean, I didn't grow up driving nails. And this was a challenge that was put before me that I kind of admired their bravery in even putting me there because I was completely unqualified for the job. I mean, not even close. So I had to work a lot. And not because the job was so hard, it's because I was so unknowledgeable. Most people could have done in 10, 12 hours, so it was taking me 18 hours. I mean, I didn't know how to read construction drawings, so I had to memorize each plan, each page of the plans. Because if I was walking the job and someone asked me a question, I couldn't say I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know how to read them. So you had to memorize them through rote. I mean, it was very interesting. But then, interestingly enough, the superintendent on the job quit. And the managing partner of the firm came down and said, you're not the superintendent. And you bring this job on time, on budget, and I will bring you back to New York, and I will get you involved in everything that I do. And that was a 6-month challenge at the time, maybe 8 months. And we did that. We brought the job in on time and on budget. And he lived up to his word, and his name was Arnold Praver, and he was a wonderful man, and he brought me back to New York and got me involved. I don't think there was a meeting that he was in for 4 years that I wasn't part of.
And that was invaluable.
It was invaluable. And I met people that I never would have had a chance to meet otherwise. And it elevated my exposure to the industry by 10, 15 years. So at the age of 27, 28, I just knew a lot of people because he was dragging me along.
And at that point, you went to, was it Boscov?
I went to Boscov's because Arnold had a heart issue.
Okay.
And was retiring. And the company was going to change dramatically and get away from development and go into asset management only. But Boscov's was a partner on a deal in Maryland. And I had, an option to go to two different places at the time. One was the Taubman Company, which was also a partner.
Sure.
And wonderful, wonderful people who were interested in my services at that time, and as was Boscov's. But Boscov's was an interesting thing. I thought our business, the folks that understood retail were ahead of the people who just understood real estate. So I wanted to be in a situation where I could learn something about retail. Albert Boscov, who was one of the great merchant princes of our time, was interested in me coming and running the real estate group, and he was going to put me in the office next to his. And I figured, well, I was just going to learn a whole bunch of stuff. So that was a tremendous experience, and probably the best, without question, the best part of all of it was I met my wife there. She was a buyer, so I met my wife at Boscov's, and then the rest is sort of history. 30 years later,
now you got a new boss, right?
That's right. But it was a tremendous experience for me. And again, aside from meeting my wife, the professional side of it was I learned the retail side of the business. So then when I moved from Boscov's to DDR at the time, it was interesting because I went back to what the retailers would all say, the dark side, right? I went back to the landlord side, but I knew all the retailers because I was one of them.
Sure.
For many years.
And in retail,
that
having
matters.
relationships with retailers that's where the value is created so often.
Yeah.
Let me push pause on your career trajectory for a second. We'll get to DDR, obviously. Just the first decade or so, you're in your 20s, you're grinding. Did you always have a plan for your life? Did you always know, like, I want to be the CEO, here's my plan, here's my vision? Or was this just something that just kind of happened?
It really just kind of happened. It wasn't any great plan. The only plan that I had was I had someone tell me very early in my career that one of the biggest shortcomings people have is that they're satisfied being good, and you should never be afraid to be great. And if you're great, the market won't let you sit on the bench. The market will take care of you. So instead of you planning what your next move might be, just go to work every day. Don't be good, be great, and you'll get recognized because very few people are truly great. And this is one of my mentors told me that. And that always stuck with me because even though there were things that you were doing every day that you didn't like, it didn't matter. You had to be great at it anyway. And if you could be great at something you don't like, then you actually had the opportunity to move to the next level so you didn't have to do that stuff anymore, right? You get somebody else to do it for you. So that was really, my motivation was just not to be good, not to be average, not to be a commodity, but to not be afraid to take some bold steps and try to be great. And then I figured the market would kind of take care of me if that were to happen, because people would notice you, and then the market's not going to let someone who's great sit on the bench.
I've never heard of that, but it's true.
Yeah, I mean, and most people, are afraid to take the steps necessary to be great. And the truth is, I had nothing to lose. I had, I couldn't go home. I mean,
we were talking about your old man said,
my old man told me once you had a job, man, you're off the payroll, goodbye. So just go for it, and that's sort of what we did.
And so would you say it's accurate? And it's like a lot of people wake up in a morning or in a day and say, yeah, you know what? I want to be great at whatever it is I'm doing. And I don't think anybody would hear or who's listening would listen to what you just said. Your mentor told you, I've never heard it, but it just, the second you said it rings so true that if you are great, the market won't let you sit on the bench. I think most people will be like, you know what, you're right. Like, somebody will come calling, someone will recruit you. Even if something bad happens to you at your current position, like you will have come in contact with someone at some point who will say, I have to have that guy on my team. So my question is it a fair statement that a lot of people would say you're right, and a lot of people say, I want to be great? But the reason, as you said, which I agree, is there's such few, is it because it's so hard to put in the work over what really likely needs to be a long period of time, a period of years, not months, not days, to really become great at something. Like, what prevents people? Let me ask this question in reverse. What prevents so many people from getting to that place you described? Like, they're going to be great at their profession, therefore the market will always take care of them.
Well, I think part of it could be work ethic, but I think another part of it is the willingness to take risk. You know, we talk about generational differences, and, you know, my generation was actually much more risk-taking than my kids' generation, you know, who are much more scheduled and scripted and coddled to some extent. And that's okay. I mean, we're the parents. We created the generation, and I'm proud of them. But in our generation, it wasn't that way. And so in real estate in particular, you have to be willing to take risk and be willing to fail. And it's okay to do that. And I think part of it is just willing to get up and get out there and just take a swing and see what happens. Even if you're 26 years old or 25 years old and people say, well, you're a little young for that. People used to say to me all the time, they used to pat me on the head and they'd say, you know, you're a little young for that. You're a little young for that. I kind of took that as a compliment because that meant I was reaching for something that probably other people weren't.
It means that you shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, and other people weren't. See, because the thing you need to do, I think, is you have to make yourself obvious to the market, make yourself obvious to your company for the next great step that needs. If they need somebody to work out a problem, if they need somebody to run a division, if they need someone to bail someone else out of some conflict that's occurred, you want to be a go-to person. Well, you won't be that go-to person if they don't know who you are, and you got to put yourself out there a little bit. And that means, and it happened to me plenty of times. I mean, failure is my middle name. It's happened, but it's okay because again, you got to get out there and take a swing at someone, and you have that opportunity to be great and to get noticed. And if that happens, it never gets erased because once people notice you, they see that you're different than somebody else. Why should you be remembered because you accomplished this or this? That will create opportunities for you that it doesn't necessarily create for other people.
Before we get into the opportunity at DDR, the first, let's just call it decade of your career, what was the craziest thing or craziest period of your life in terms of just pouring your energy and effort into this professional success? In many ways catapulted you or created the momentum that led to everything else we're about to talk through?
I think probably there was a project that was a very important project to our company in New York. And then actually that's where I met Al Boskov. Boskovs were a partner in the deal. And it was a mall in downtown Scranton, Pennsylvania called the Mall at Steamtown. I'll never forget it. And all the fancy people in our office didn't want to work on it because it was Scranton. And
Scranton was more blue collar.
It was blue collar, and they wanted to work on the fancier sites in Florida and Texas and wherever, warmer weather.
They wanted to travel to.
Yeah, they wanted the warmer weather and stuff like that. And Scranton is a tough town, and it's a great town, by the way, and I loved it. And what happened was I was the person who stepped up and said, you know what, I'll do this project. It was very complicated. It was a tear down of 3 city blocks, and there was a lot of public funding we had to go to Washington and get and things of that nature. And when that project got finished and opened, it was noticed that project got off the ground. And that was my project, not because I wanted it, it's because nobody else wanted it. And I said I'd take it.
Was that... And you may have multiple moments throughout your career where you look back, either at the completion or perhaps a couple years after the completion of a period of time or a project where you say, wow, I can't believe I did that.
That was an interesting experience. I really felt that as I was working on that project, there were many, many more reasons for it to fail than succeed. And I figured that, the way I would be able to make a name for myself is to not fall into that trap of, well, this is what was expected, and it wasn't, Scranton, and tenant interest was mild and things of that nature. And we pulled it off. And we got it built. And I think that was probably the time when I really thought that I liked to build things. I really learned that, impacting a city block and And the people in Scranton were so proud of that project, and it was so successful. And for so many years, I really enjoyed giving something back, not just to the community, but giving something back to my partners.
When was the last time you've been back?
I was back there probably 6 or 7 years, and unfortunately, like many of the malls, it hasn't done particularly well. Society's changed and stuff. Different. But the grand opening of that
there was no internet back then.
There was no internet. The opening of that project was something special, and that was probably the biggest stepping stone of my career.
Would you say earlier? I want to go back to something you said. Somebody said, "Hey, you're a little young for that," and I think I said it's kind of like you shouldn't be able to do this. Would you say one of your drivers, other than being great, was proving people wrong?
No question.
Still a driver?
It's still a driver. Yeah, sure. I mean, I made a lot of decisions that people didn't agree with, and then you use that as motivation to prove them wrong. And there's no question about that. It's you got to play with a chip on your shoulder, a little bit. And
who are you talking to? Right?
Yeah, no, you do. You got to play with a chip on your shoulder a little bit. And even if people aren't doubting you as much today as they were 10 years ago, you have to convince yourself that they actually dislike you more.
Call that manufactured adversity.
Yeah, you do it, and that keeps
you
keeps
still
you going.
do that.
I sure do.
Because I don't think anybody really doubts you at this point.
No,
but all that matters is what's in your head.
Yeah, and I really do think, that that's a motivating factor for a lot of people.
If you want me to manufacture a story about some people doubting you, I could do that for you.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
I'd appreciate that.
It was a couple of weeks ago. I was with a group of people, and they were just generally disparaging you. But anyway, I'll talk to you about that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
No, manufactured story. No, I hear you. I hear you. The chip on the shoulder. Everybody thinks I can do that. You see these sports teams. I'll take like the Golden State Warriors. Over the last 6-7 years, the most successful NBA franchise, and they win a championship, and right after the game, like, everybody doubted us. The world didn't think we could do it, and you're sitting there like, what do you mean everybody doubted you? You've been the favorite since game one. Not one single bet in Vegas went against you. But I think these high-performing, we'll use athletes, right? High-performing people is part of, like, we're talking about mentality here today. And the mindsets behind what drives, in this case, these super athletes, is like they convince themselves that nobody thinks they can do it. And it's like everyone thinks you can do it, but in their heads, they really believe. They get to a place mentally where they're like, no, like, I'm going to prove everyone wrong. Even if, again, surface, everyone's like, no way, we actually think you're going to win the championship. And my question to you, getting back to our conversation, was, it sounds like that's still something you do, right?
You do, and I think part of it is manufactured, but not all of it. This is a very competitive business. I have competitors, you have competitors, and we know that. And we have people that are very happy for our success, and there are also people that are very happy for our failure. And that,
maybe not to your face, but
but we know they exist.
We
know they exist, and there's only one way to counter that, right? And that is to be successful. And it's like,
beat their ass.
It's like whenever I would have a particularly bad moment during a game in college, I'd come over the sidelines and my coach would pull me over and say, "Just do me a favor, just go out and hit someone with an opposite color jersey, please." Yeah. And that's
it's
sort
simple
of
but effective.
But simple but effective, and that's sort of the way it is in business. Just go out there and hit someone with an opposite color jersey and see what happens.
What advice would you have for new people entering the workforce, just in general, or what? Let me add a tack on question, like, what are the most common mistakes you see people who are entering their professional careers?
I think the most common mistake is the misnomer that you're going to like everything you do. I think people come in with very, very high expectations that their satisfaction level is going to be unusually high at an early point. And when it's not, they get discouraged very, very quickly.
Do you think that's being messaged to them?
I don't know. Because I've seen a lot of that.
We create these caricatures, these these stereotypical college professors, and I don't know if it's that.
It could be. I also think that people are sort of afraid to afraid to lose. They're afraid to be wrong. They want to. It's highly competitive now with everything from social media to even just chat groups with college friends and stuff. Everyone wants to do well.
Your mistakes are public and forever now.
And forever and all those things. And I think they're putting too much pressure on themselves. Just go to work. And like I said earlier, just go to work and be great. And if you actually can be great at something you don't like, just think how fantastic you can be at something you love.
Which eventually you will likely work your way in a position to
Totally.
doing something that very much aligns with your, they call it passions, so enthusiasms, your loves.
That's right. And I think people shouldn't worry about early stages of their career being in love with anything that they're doing. They should just make sure that they're creating the right work ethic, they're creating the right brand for themselves, because we're all personal brands,
yes,
right? And we all have to. I mean, you know that better than anybody.
I think when we were growing up, it was called reputation.
Yeah, and
now it's called a brand.
Now
right?
it's called a brand, but it's very, very important, and you want to be that go-to person. So, I think the biggest mistake people have is their expectations for total professional satisfaction are too high, too early, and don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. Just go to work. And be terrific.
Name something that you were not satisfied, that you didn't love to do earlier on, but you just said, hey, this is part of what I got to do. It is what it is.
So I'll give you a good example.
Please.
I'll give you a good example. Back in the old days, and I talk about 88, 89, there was no internet. In fact, the fax machine was like the big thing, right? And the mail would come in every day, and everything had to be coded and everything had to be filed. And one of the partners of the firm did all the coding and did all the file and did all the reading because he wanted to know everything that was going on at the firm. And when I came back from the construction site back to New York, he decided that would be a good job for me. So I would have a bag of mail dumped on my desk every morning that I would have to open and I would have to code and bring to the file room for the file clerk to put into the file. And I hated it.
That sounds bad.
It was horrible. I mean, because everything had a code.
And that's the first thing you do every day.
Every single letter that came into the company passed my desk. But the interesting point of that was I knew everything that was going on. I mean, I learned so much. I mean, I had done a good job. I brought this project in. We built this mall. I came back to New York for this big job, and I get a bag of mail on my desk every morning. But I really thought that it was a grind to get that done. But then I realized, you know what? Stop complaining and read everything. And by the way, some of the stuff I should not have read. Right? There's some highly privileged, confidential stuff in there. That
gave you a lot of leverage. Yeah.
It just taught me things, and then when I saw something that was interesting, I can go into my boss's office and say, "By the way, this was in the mail today. What was this in reference to? What does this mean? How do you do this, or whatever it was?" So I really didn't like the job, but I was able to do, but I was really good at it because whenever someone had a question about information in the office, they started to come to me. After about 3, 4, 5 months, they realized that not only was I coding everything, I was actually reading everything. And that gave me great inside knowledge as to what was going on and what was happening.
I tell people the best way to be indispensable is to be indispensable.
Yeah.
All right. Moving forward, you were named president, COO of DDR during a very tumultuous time in history. I think it was 2008.
2008, CEO in 2010.
Yeah. And so 2008, the recession had begun. And so you step into this role. What's going through your head? I mean, first you moved from New York to Cleveland, right? Beechwood?
Well, I actually had moved from Boscov's to Cleveland to Beechwood, yeah. So that was in Pennsylvania. But it was an interesting time. The stock price for the company had gone from $66 to $1.54. We were obviously headed into more than just a recession.
Was there a period of time where it was so low that you're like, I don't know if we're going to get out of this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there used to be a running chart in the Wall Street Journal about the companies most likely to go bankrupt, and we were always
Up there.
high on the chart.
I was a young pup in the industry, but I remember hearing water cooler talk. Oh, it's only a matter of time before developers diversify.
Right.
And then eventually DDR.
There was we were odds-on favorite at that point because of our balance sheet, and the stock price had crashed, and then the board decided to make a change at CEO, and I thought that there were things that we could do, but I will tell you that we could not have gotten them done if it wasn't for some positive momentum in the market and some good relationships and some friends that really worked hard with us to get it done. I mean, the people that, not just my team at the time, which I changed, because there were people that we needed to. We had certain positions within the company we needed to upgrade, and we did that. But I also felt that there were market conditions that helped us become successful quicker than I thought we would, which was nice.
It didn't feel like it at the time, but the tailwinds coming out 2010, then 11, 12, 13, everything started getting better.
Things started to get better, and our company was structured in a way that we were able to underpromise and overdeliver, basically. And that was something that was the opposite of what the company had done prior. So it was a different direction, and it was a different culture, and it worked very beneficial.
It's very humble for you to say. There were some market tailwinds coming out of GFC, but at the time, DDR, you guys were primarily big box power. I remember I used to give out these golf balls, Pro V1s, I think, and it said, "Power centers are our fairway." Was that what it was? Was that you? All right. This is why retail just got so banged up over the past 15 years. Okay, you're coming out of GFC. Every product type's hammered. Every product type starts healing in many ways except retail because of online started coming. And especially in the big box, that became a worry. But you guys, you navigated your way through it.
Yeah, we navigated our way through it. We had real success from a total shareholder return perspective, which is good. It also helps to start at a very low base.
Yeah,
that
managing expectations.
Yeah, but at the same time, we had good results, and the company did fine. It was a lot of hard work by a lot of people through the crisis. Our biggest problem was our balance sheet.
Which you repaired. I think it was Moody's, S&P, Fitch, to consensus investment grade.
Yeah, we were able to get that done, and that was a big thing. It was a big thing, and really what happens is when you're CEO of a public company in a situation like this, you're really not. You could be CEO of any company. The fact that real estate was just coincidental because you're nothing more than a capital raiser. I never saw the real estate for years.
And you love capital raising, right?
Yeah, it's my least favorite. My least favorite part of the job was going around because you're really begging for money to keep the company alive, and there were hundreds and hundreds of employees that depended on it, and municipalities and things of that nature. So you went to work, but at the same time, it's not the glorious part of running a real estate company from my perspective. In my core, I wanted to be an operator.
An operator, developer.
I wanted to be an operator. I didn't want to be a beggar.
Let me push pause on the career and want to. I mean, okay. So you're at Shopco, then Boscov's, then DDR. I mean, you're rising up. You're the CEO of a publicly traded company. How old are you at this time?
I was.
Sorry to age you here. But.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was. I started, I think I was 46, 47.
Yeah, which is...
As CEO?
Yeah, and especially 46, at that time, young for that position. So I want to push pause on the professional part and talk about family. Like, how did family and getting married and building a family fit into a very successful but likely a very demanding career trajectory?
Well, family obviously has a huge role in everything that I've done, and my wife Ellie and my two kids have been the inspiration of my life, and I was not willing to sacrifice family for business, but I also was willing to work, and I always knew that would be the case. By the way, I mean I grew up with great mom and great dad and a great family. And I wanted something like that, but the only way you can really do that is to control your own schedule. So one of the motivating factors for me earlier in my career was working as hard as I can so I could rise it to the level where, I wasn't punching a clock, and I could leave and go to a game. I can go to my daughter's plays.
And you knew that, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you tell me if I'm not hearing you correctly. You knew that earlier in your career when you didn't have those commitments,
yes,
specifically to children, and going to games and plays and all that, because your spouse, you could do dinner on a Friday night, right? But with kids, you said, hey, I don't have that, so now is the time to basically, burn the candle at both ends.
It was, and because I wanted to be able to control my own schedule. I don't like to think of myself as a control freak in any way, but I do like to have the freedom to be able to walk out of the office and go to my son's game or my daughter's play, and
not ask for permission,
and not ask for permission, and not have anyone ask me where I'm going. So I was very fortunate enough to work successfully enough early in my career to get to a point where I could actually navigate the work-life balance, however you want to call it that.
So you are for work-life balance?
Nah, it's personal.
Yeah.
That the thing about work-life balance is that people talk about it as if it's a uniform thing, and it's not. Work-life balance is a very individualized perspective for each person, and many people probably would have thought that my career was not an appropriate work-life balance, but it worked for me, and it worked for my family, and it worked okay. And there are other people who have enormous, pride in their work-life balance, and I would have napped through that. I mean, it just
you would have been
it wouldn't have worked. I would have been unhappy, and I would have felt that I was leaving too much on the table, and I should get back to work. So I think work-life balance, while it's important, I think it's completely individual, and it's up to the other person, and no one should be judged by how they decide to pursue that work-life balance.
Yeah, a longer conversation, so we don't have to dive in. I think this is my opinion alone. That's one of the challenges, is that there are very driven young men and women entering the workforce, but there is a segment of the population that very much promotes evangelizes the work-life balance concept, and that's what brings them happiness. And I think you and I would agree, if that's what brings them happiness and that's satisfying, that brings them fulfillment, God bless and Godspeed. Like you said, it would make you unhappy. There wouldn't be fulfillment. You'd have a lot left on the table. But in today's day and age, that half for the room is projecting to the other half that actually wants to be driven and wants to accomplish, and just simply put, wants to get into a place where they can control their own schedule, and kind of wrapped in a case of judgment, saying, oh, like, so that's what you want? Well, that's not good.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between true personal work-life balance and those people who candidly want to work less and get paid more. Under the guise of work-life balance.
Yeah, because sometimes
that might be right for somebody, and that's fine. But they can't do that here. Then this is not the culture for them.
Sometimes when someone steps down from a role, we spoke about this earlier. They say, hey, one of the reasons is work-life balance. It's like it's effectively saying, hey, I want to work less and get paid the same, if not more.
Or I'm working too hard.
Yeah.
We had an employee that worked. We did a search for an analyst, and this gentleman came and worked for us, and he was with us a week and quit. And he didn't talk to me, but he talked to his direct supervisor. And I said, well, what happened? He said he was working too hard. I said, you know what? Good for him.
Yeah.
That's good for him, because everyone's entitled to be happy.
Yes.
And it's not right. So not every culture is right for those people. And I think the quicker you realize that, the better you are, because you should go find your place. It just may not be working for Matthews or Raider Hill, for that matter. It may
probably not.
No, it may not. I mean,
but again, there's no judgment.
There's no judgment. No judgment at all.
God bless. You're at DDR. You're running this public company. You completely turned it around with the help of great teammates. Okay, with the help of a great markets, no doubt. But you were the captain of the ship. You got it back to consensus investment grade. It's 2014. You left 2015. Was that? Is it just as simple? If I'm reading into that, it's like, hey, mission accomplished. Like, I'm going to go start a new challenge.
That's part of it. Part of it was mission accomplished. Part of it, like I said, it was a CEO public company that had to raise about $14 billion to survive, was a lot. And the question is, what's next? Like I said before, I'm a better coach than I am cheerleader. And even though the company had been done well and we got to the certain point, I think we all realized that the path ahead was going to be more maintenance than it was building, and it was time to go. And by the way, it was time to go from everyone's perspective. I think, a little bit of me can go a long way, and I think the company was happy to see me go, and I was happy to move on and do other things and start new things. Because that was a grind. I mean, I was there 16 years, and that last 5 years as CEO is a grind to get the company back to where it was. And I think it was time for somebody else to take the reign. I had done all I could do.
Yeah, I was trying to understand the mindset behind, mission accomplished, and then you go and you start this new thing. Well, there was a couple of spots in between. I'll touch on it in a second. Go back. I want to share with the audience, share with the listeners. I had heard this story before you had shared it, but it's great. I love it because I can visualize you and the crew sitting in that little lobby. So your office in Beechwood, because I've been there.
Yeah.
I always came bearing gifts. There's your office and there's this little waiting area, little
sitting
table,
room.
little sitting room. There you go. The company's, it's 2009, 10, let's call it. You're CEO. It's not going well.
Nope.
How did you change strategy? You know where I'm leading you here. Talk to us about these really, really important, serious executive meetings.
Well, what happened, really, people were working like crazy, and the market was not moving. And, the stock price had come down, and it was staying down. And it was discouraging. And you know how each year on the holiday, people would bring you gifts and they'd bring you wine and stuff like that, like yourself. I called the senior team into the sitting room off my office, and I said to them at the time, I said, ladies and gentlemen, obviously running this company sober is not working. Let's have some wine. And we opened up the wine and with Dixie cups, and we were drinking, the spectacular first growth Bordeaux wines in coffee cups.
On Fridays, right?
Well, this was a Friday, and then actually the following week the stock started to go up. It started to go up. So you can't break the tradition. So every Friday we would sit in that room and have some wine, and it ended up company went on a pretty good run.
It did. That's funny. It's funny when you're in those times, those really dark, challenging times. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it, but you look back, and I know when you tell me that story, it's like you always smile, and I got to imagine some of the other guys I know who were in those rooms with you, it probably was a special time.
Well, you need to calm things down. People panic, and for good reason. You had a stock price that had gone down to almost zero, and even though it was going up a little bit, it was coming down just as much as going. So
I'll tell you, you had a lot of white-collar professionals at DDR in a city, a city very close to my heart, Cleveland, Ohio, where very, very much so was raised there. But if DDR goes down, there's not a lot of industry there in large retail operations where they can just go and get another job, not to mention at that time. So it likely would be a major disruption. So that entire element, that the environment was likely pervasive throughout the company for a year or two. We're just people every day is like, is my professional life going to end? And then they're looking at you, the leader. It's a high stress environment, and maybe not with the 300 or so employees, but with at least your leadership team. You said, let's break out some Dixie Cup and
let's relax a little bit. And I remember very clearly it did become a habit. I mean, we did it because we're superstitious, and on Fridays we would sit down after hours and have some wine. And I remember one of our board members said to me, I don't think that's a good idea. And I said, I'm sorry you feel that way, but we're going to continue to do it because it's pretty important.
Drinking on the job, CEO Dan Hurwitz, drinking on the job.
Well, but it was important because, and we talked a lot of business. You bring everyone in. How was your week? What's new? What's going on? Let's talk about this together. The camaraderie that resulted from that was very important for the company.
In vino veritas, right? In wine, there's truth.
Yeah.
So it's 2015. It's golden parachute, right off in the sunset. You're on the aircraft carrier. It says mission accomplished. Okay. What happens next?
It's sort of interesting. As I was leaving the company, I had what was a separation agreement that didn't prevent me from recruiting people from the company. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that was incorrect, by the way, but it was an article that said that I was a candidate for the CEO of another job in the REIT space, which was not true. But nevertheless, they printed it, and they never called me for comment, so it was what it was. And the then senior executive of the company, because they had not replaced me yet, they were still doing the search, called me and said, the board's concerned that you're going to be leaving, and you could actually take a lot of people. So this wasn't a contentious situation. So they said, would you give us at least like a 6-month non-compete or non-poaching clause or something like that? Because really what had happened was my contract had expired, so there was no. So I said, I would do that, but I do actually want to poach one person, and that's my partner, Joe Tishar. So I agreed to give them time that I wouldn't take anyone else, as long as they let me take a shot at getting Joe to come with me to New York to start this company.
And Joe was, what, he had 28 at the time?
27, 28, yeah. And we had hired Joe out of college, and he went through our management training program, and he became my chief of staff during the recession, and when no one knew what a chief of staff was.
And he helped you with your congressional testimony.
He wrote my congressional testimony. Which, by the way, was an invitation, not a subpoena.
Just
very important.
Just for the record.
Just for the record.
Yeah.
And he wrote my congressional testimony and did a spectacular job, and that's how I made him chief of staff. And then he ultimately rose to be head of corporate operations, and then left DDR very shortly after I did, and helped me form Raider Hill.
So you started Raider Hill, but then I was around for this because I was at the time actively trading deals for, well, it used to be Centra, then to Brixmor. Brixmor had, if I remember correct, some accounting irregularity, and there was a change at the top, and you stepped in. Yeah,
we were asked. So the largest owner of shares at Brixmor was, at the time, Blackstone. And when that happened, they requested that I come in as an interim CEO to try to stabilize the situation, and then find the new management team as well. So Joe and I did that in 2016. So it was a 6-month interim period. When I left the public markets, I had left the public markets. I wasn't going back.
It wasn't something you were angling.
No, and I thought that was important too, because I didn't want the market to think that I was a candidate for the job, because it would have impacted the potential talent that would be interested in it. So we made it very clear that I was not going to stay at Brixmor as the CEO. I was just there on an interim basis. We went out and were just extraordinarily lucky to find Jim Taylor, who's just an extraordinary CEO and has done a great job at Brixmor, and I'm still on the board, and very proud of that company, and proud of everything that they've done.
I love Jim, a good friend of mine, an even closer friend of mine. I just wanted you to share the story. Brian Finnegan, Executive Vice President and Chief Revenue Officer at Brixmor. Tell us the story. It was something when you first got to Brixmor. Finnegan was in his office. Do you remember the story? No,
I have a lot of Brian Finnegan stories, so I got to be
something like, I don't know if it was a ping pong or if it was a dress code.
Well, Brian did have issues with the dress code. There's no question about it. He had some of the worst sport codes. But we did. There was a situation where I was walking down the hall, and one of the leasing people and the general counsel were playing ping pong, and I'm not sort of a ping pong foosball guy in the office, and I walked by, and then I wasn't quite sure what I saw. So I kind of walked back and I looked, and I said to those guys, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "We're playing ping pong. We're taking a break in the middle of the day." I was like, "Taking a break?" I said, "Are we 100% leased? I mean, is every document, every lease out to every tenant that wants to lease space from us?" They're like, "No, but we like to, take a break in the middle of the day." I said, "Guys, you sit at a desk and you talk on the phone all day. You're not laying brick. It's not like you have to take a break and hydrate. Let's not play ping pong and let's get back to work."
I love that story. And if you hear Finnegan, he does a good impression of you. Like, guys, come on. A buddy of ours, this is where I first heard it, so I'll give him credit. Luke Petherbridge, who's the CEO of Link Logistics, Blackstone's industrial platform. He told me once the culture of a company is a shadow of the CEO, right? And that story at Brixmor, again, you were only there 4 or 5 months, so you can imagine what the culture of a company you run. But how would you describe the culture of DDR when you were there, or the culture of Raider Hill, and ultimately the culture, ideally, where you're going to get it to of an organization you're running?
Well, I'd like to think that the culture is collaborative and fair, but not particularly easy. I mean, I think it's direct. I think people know where they stand, and we celebrate their successes and we discuss failures very seriously. And I think that's important from a culture perspective. I don't think you necessarily need to have the same culture and the same management style for every employee, right? You have to make sure that you understand, what motivates your players at the right time and how to get to them. But at the same time, I think you have to be fair with people. And that doesn't mean we'll always agree, and it doesn't mean it's an easy place to work. But you want people to know that where they stand, where you stand, where the company stands. We're very open, very honest, and very collaborative. And I think that's important. But at the end of the day, the company has to be a meritocracy. It just must, because otherwise it destroys the culture. When you're really good people see average people excel for some reason that is unbeknownst to anybody. You just can't have that. You can't have workarounds. Everyone's got to carry their weight. Everyone has to be responsible for their own performance, quite frankly. And I think it's important that they get the feedback and the mentorship to help them be successful. I mean, my goal, I want to see everyone be enormously successful. I think I get a huge kick out of people who come in and they came from some place where they maybe even weren't that successful, and they find enormous success in our organization. I feel really good about that. I think that's a lot of fun. That's part of the fun, is helping people build their career. Yeah. And not just have a job, but a real career.
Yeah, I'll speak for myself. It's fulfilling when it's a feeling, so I'll say when you feel like you put someone in a position to be successful, because at the end of the day, they had to do it.
Yeah.
Or that you had a hand in providing an opportunity that they then seized.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the good people will know how to seize it, and not everyone will, and that's okay.
You just said, hey, for someone to be accountable to their results or the quality of their work, was there ever a time in your career, and we see this a lot, but was there ever a time in your career where and it's okay to admit, no judgment, like where maybe you had a victim mentality, like, hey, it's somebody's doing this to me, or this isn't my fault? Like, were ever times where you felt like you entered that valley of despair where you're just like, I've been set up, it's a bad situation?
Yeah, I had plenty of those situations, and particularly when I was younger, you tend sometimes to think that people aren't giving you a chance, or you took the hit for something that wasn't really your hit. It was a senior manager's hit, but they didn't have the honesty to really explain what went on. I did feel that at times in my career. I've also seen it occur. And by the way, as you evaluate as your CEO and you see some of your managers do that to subordinates, that's a very poor reflection on that manager, and something that you have to address as a CEO. But I do think we all have situations like that, particularly if you're a rising young person. You know, people are afraid of you. You know, you are, number one, you're cheap labor in most cases, and number two, you may very well replace somebody who is not as good as you.
And so a threat.
And you are a threat. I mean, I'll never forget, I was talking to a businessman early in my career, and he told me, he said, make sure. He says, you'd only take a job based on access. He said, because you never want some middle manager who's scared of you to deflect your progress and deflect your performance from the people who can make a decision that can change your life.
So direct access to the decision.
Have direct access. Always, always, always have access to the people that can make a difference in your life. And he said that because in business, it's not uncommon for people to see others as a threat and then try to hold them back a little bit. And you have to make sure that that doesn't happen to you.
And is that something that, you know, early in your career you may have felt that was happening, or you may have had that mindset, again, not the victim mentality of like somebody's doing something to me. Is that something that went away with you? Is that something you kind of coached yourself out of, where you have agency over your life in total now?
It's really all goes back to just going back to work. You know, you can have that victim mentality, but you can have it for about 5 minutes, and then no one really cares. And if you feel like you're the victim, that's very nice. Get over it and get back to work. Because if you then go back to work and you just outperform, you just do better than everyone else, again, you will not be on the bench. You know, nobody gets rewarded by keeping their best players on the bench. And so it's motivation. It's motivation to go back out there and get back to work. So you can say, you know what, I got screwed on this, or this happened to me, or this is something that isn't fair, or this guy did this. You know what? You have about 5 minutes of that. I feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for myself. We all feel sorry for me. That's great. Now go back to work.
Back to work.
And win.
Life's not fair.
And win.
And win. That's important. What advice would you have for people? Because I'm about to ask you about Raider Hill, starting a company, being a founder. Number one, why? Number two, the difference of being a founder versus stepping in as CEO. But before I do that, it's my opinion, there's actually a lot of people who have their toes on the edge and they're, you know, at the cliff and using the metaphor of jumping. They want to start a company, or they want to leave their current position and go for that big promotion, or go to another company that is it's a much bigger opportunity, or start a new career. Just somebody who's on the edge and is just waiting and waiting and waiting. And I don't know if it's they just haven't found the courage yet, or they're paralyzed by the fear of that decision not working out long term. You've made some big decisions. Obviously, you ended up starting your own company. What advice would you have for people who are listening, who they need that push?
Well, I think one thing that's very important, and I just say this because it's my personal experience, is that I probably would not have done it if I didn't get Joe to come with me, because it's fun when you do it with a partner. It's lonely when you do it alone. And for me, building something and having a teammate.
You're a team sport player.
Yeah. And having a teammate, and then going out and building a team, and then trying to do that was all kind of fun. Coming up with a strategy and a playbook and going out and just doing those things, none of which, by the way, worked. Anything that we strategized about is not exactly how it goes, but that's okay. That it's the thought that counts. But I would, if you can, because you'll have those times that are very difficult, and they can be extremely lonely. But if you have a partner that's sort of in there swinging with you, it's a little easier, and you also feel a greater sense of obligation to each other, and I think that's important. And for me, that was incredibly important. I don't know if I would have started the company if it was just me and me alone.
What if? And I'm going to lead you here. Is your mentality is one of to be great. proving people wrong, setting your own schedule. Just a very driven person. I always summarize high achievers. How important is it? I'll give you a softball here. How important is it to have a partner who is very aligned from a mentality perspective and really ultimately commitment to perspective? And how dangerous is it to say, hey, I'm going to go partner up with someone, whether it's start a business or you're a broker. I'm going to go, this broker's going to be my deal partner. If there isn't alignment.
Well, you can't do it if there's not alignment. You can't do it at all. In fact, you're better off not starting the company because the aggravation that will result is far, far worse than any of the success you could achieve. It just doesn't work. I mean, I've seen it for almost 40 years. Like I said, in this business, you see partnerships that just don't work, where partners don't get along, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, that's why it's hard. It's hard, but you got to find somebody who you completely trust. And culturally you have alignment with, and in many ways just makes you better. You should make your partner better, and your partner should make you better. And if that works, that will make you different. That can make you special, and that could lead to success. If you are, if it's a partnership of convenience, it's probably not going to end well. That's probably not going to end well. And so I feel very fortunate, but I also understand how difficult it is for people to take that leap. But I would rather be it alone than be with someone who is not a compatible partner, but a convenient partner. And there's a very big difference.
And this gets to a compatible partner, but what in your experience, I mean, you've been doing this for 40 years, I think you said. What are the common traits or attributes of successful people that you've encountered career? And we could just ask that question of what are the traits or attributes of people who would make a great partner for you?
Well, I think first of all, communication skill is absolutely critical. I don't know how else to put that.
So what do you mean? Do you mean that how candid they are in feedback? Is that writing style?
Well, no. I just think candid directness is very, very important. You can't afford, when you start your own company, you really can't afford to make a lot of mistakes. So you have to understand what's going on all the time, and there has to be open and honest communication on a regular basis. You can't really have open and honest communication with somebody you don't like very much, right? You have to really like spending a lot of time with that person, whether it's in the office, whether it's lunches, whether it's dinners, whatever it has to be, it's traveling. You have to really, really respect that person's intellect. You have to respect their opinion, and you have to respect their ethic. Which is absolutely critical to forming the culture of a company, just the business ethic you want to convey. So from my perspective, I think that finding that person is not easy. I mean, it's really, really hard. And I have experienced a lot of situations where you see and you know that a partnership isn't going to work. But this particular case, I really felt confident that I could move on from what I was doing, go into what we're doing now with a partner that was completely aligned and, quite frankly, had skills that I didn't have. And hopefully I have skills that he doesn't have, and then we make each other better.
He does have hair.
He does have hair.
It's great hair.
Yeah.
No, it's we spoke earlier, we touched on briefly, but I actually want to take this opportunity to dive into and these are my words, you correct me if I'm wrong, like very much a mentor to your partner, Joe. And now earlier on in terms of at DDR, and now you guys are true partners. But how important is it to have a mentor in this business, or was it for you early in your career? And what advice would you have for those who maybe they don't have a mentor?
Well, I think mentorship is the quintessential element to success.
There you go.
I mean, it just is. To me, there is no chance, for some strange reason, certain individuals took me under their wing and taught me this business. They taught me how to manage. They taught me the technical side of the business, but they also taught me other sides of the business, including running companies. And I don't know why they did it. I'm enormously grateful that they did, and I work every day to make them proud. And when I think of Arnold Praver and I think of Albert Boskov, both of whom have now passed, and I think of the time that they spent working on me, because I was a rough cut,
An uncut gem.
an uncut gem for sure. But I would just say it was a gift that was given to me that far exceeded anything else they could have given me monetarily or otherwise. And if you're able to find someone that you respect and admire, and they're willing to give you their time and mentor, I would tell any young person, just grab it.
And hang on.
Just grab it and hang on. I mean, it's just very, very important because most successful people like to watch other people become successful, and they like to help them do that. It's not you don't really want to work for someone who's only in it for themselves. You know, I tell people all the time, if you go to college, I talk to a lot of college kids, and they go for interviews, and if a company doesn't ask you, what you're interested in and why, that means they don't care. Right? If you go into an interview and you just get the scripted interview, what's the price of gold today kind of thing, what's the 10-year doing, et cetera, they don't care about you. They don't care about you. You're going to work 90 hours a week to make someone else rich. The question is, you want to go work someplace where someone says, what makes you tick? What's going on? And then if it's a match, that company actually cares enough about you to invest in your success. And with that will come mentorship. But if the company doesn't ask you those questions, if you're just 30 of 4,000 people they brought in to interview, and you're one of the lucky 30 that made this year's intern class, that it might look good on a business card, but it's not gonna make you happy. The key is finding somebody who cares about you, but you have to show them that you're worthy of their mentorship. You're worthy of their time. Mm-hmm. And you have to give them the work. You have to give them the time. You have to give them the trust. I can't tell you how many times I was involved in situations where I was sitting in the room thinking to myself, I really shouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. I really shouldn't be listening to this conversation. When I was 22, 23, 24 years old, even later, and say to myself, this is not where I should be sitting at this stage of my career. Why am I in this room? But, that was part of it. That was all part of the trust that people had in having me in the room. And I think you have to be worthy of that trust. And if you are, and then people are willing to give of themselves to you, and you're willing to give of yourself to them, it's going to make for a terrific career.
Now, let me just take Raider Hill, for example. If there's, let's just say 20 people out on the floor, and do you go and seek out a specific person to mentor based on their day-to-day behaviors and commitments, or is that something people will have to ask you, and then you kind of wait and see to determine if it's worth your time?
Well, first of all, you do it for the people who are your highest performers and the people that you want. You got to earn it, right?
Yeah,
you got to earn.
sure.
You got to earn the time. But it's interesting because you can mentor more than one person at a time. And if you look at a group of analysts at any given time, some of them do some things extremely well and are just short here or there. And it really helps them to talk about it and to spend time with them. And everyone, you got to push different buttons for different people. But I will typically, where I will try to gravitate is to someone who I think has extraordinary talent, probably doesn't believe in themselves as much as I do, and we need to get them over that hump. For whatever reason, they're probably not thinking of themselves, or their work product isn't quite reflective as what it could be, even though they have enormous talent. And I remember early in Joe's career, he would say to me all the time, I'm really not qualified for this or not this. And I said, someday you'll have as much confidence in you as I do. Yeah. And that's the important thing, because when you've been around a long time, you can see it. I mean, you can pick it out. You know who's going to be outstanding and who's going to be good. And by the way, not everyone can be great. not everyone can be great. That's why there's a differentiation.
That's why people are different. Yeah,
Yeah, that's why people do. That's what makes baseball,
yes.
right?
Yes.
But at the same time,
and football.
But at the same time, certain people, it's fun to see them, and maybe they don't come from a background, or maybe they haven't been given the opportunity. It's great to be able to lift them up and see them go to the next level.
So at Raider Hill, you're not just sitting around mentoring people. You are leading this company. You guys are growing. You're super active. Walk the audience through Raider Hill, the company. What does it look like? What do you guys do?
That's a good question.
Still trying to figure it out.
I'm trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. Raider Hill is it started pretty much as a retail only advisory business for institutional capital. And then when we first started the company, we had one client, happened to be Blackstone, so it's a spectacular client, but wonderful people that were able to support our efforts, and we were hopefully able to support their efforts, and they're still a terrific client and very important to us. But we were primarily working on the retail side because the retail business was in turmoil. You know, if you all remember the retail Armageddon and the fact that it was going away, and we didn't really believe that to be the truth. We thought there were opportunities out there. We didn't think everything was great. We thought that you had to be careful. So we were able to advise institutional capital on their retail investments. So we got involved in a lot of different things, and then what happens is the phone starts to ring a little bit, right? And other people call you up and say, "Hey, look, I have this situation. Can you help me with it?" And where we could, we'd say yes, and where we couldn't, we'd say no. And so we ended up with a pretty good size advisory side of the business where we would only take on clients where there are obviously no conflicts and institutional capital who had invested in retail. Most recently, we've gotten a little bit more involved in office because office is starting to look and feel a little bit like retail did in the, when in 2016, 17, when people were concerned that Amazon.
The office guys like, hey, where are those retail guys? They've been dealing with problems for 15 years.
Yeah, we deal with problems all the time. Yeah, no, the retail business is very, very consistent. We're either in a massive recovery or a massive recession. We're never just okay.
No.
It's never, when people say, how's business? It's never just fine. Right, we're either doing really, really well, or the bottom's falling out.
I'm gonna have some multifamily guys on here in a couple of weeks, and they're gonna be like, I don't know what's happening. I mean, like values are going down. I've never seen this. I didn't know that could happen. I was like, yeah,
welcome to the club.
Vacancies and rent concession. Like, oh yeah. It's real estate.
Yeah, that's retail. Like
where does the name Raider Hill come from?
Oh, so Raider.
I've been meaning to ask you this for like 8 years. Every time I see it, I forget.
Many years ago.
It sounds scary.
Well, it's not. Many years ago, I actually bought a housing development outside of the campus of Colgate, and there were a bunch of houses on there. And people who bought the houses were coaches and alumni and parents and stuff like that, and so people just started to refer to it as Raider Hill. So we needed a New York LLC when we started the company, and I had one because I had this housing development thing, and people called it Raider Hill because it's the Colgate Raiders.
I thought it was a play on like corporate Raiders.
No, it had nothing to do with it. It had to do with a little housing project in Hamilton, New York that I made up an LLC years ago. So when someone said you need a New York LLC, I didn't want to spend $50 to do another one, so I just used the one I had.
Well, when you're a startup business, you don't have $14 billion of capital that you raised. Speaking of starting a business, I wrote this down. I'm fascinated to learn, or to listen, I should say, and to learn. Is what are the differences for you? What has your experience been, and what lessons have you learned being a founder of a company versus stepping into companies that had already existed, that I don't want to say well-oiled, but there's infrastructure, as opposed to Raider Hill, it's you and Joe in a Regis.
Well, there's first of all, there's a lot more risk.
What do you? I know, but like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there's a good chance you don't get paid. As bad as things were during the great financial crisis at DDR, or as bad as things were when there were some accounting issues at Brixmor and stuff like that, there was really no risk that you weren't going to get paid.
Other than losing your job, maybe. I mean, but you got your check every.
You got your check every 2 weeks or whatever it was. I mean, there was enormous stability in getting paid.
I feel like DDR. It was almost like the risk was you might not make as much as you want, but you're still going to get paid.
You're going to get paid.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to get paid. And
when you're a founder,
when you're a founder, if you only first of all you're paying yourself to some extent, right?
Assuming you're not raising capital.
Right, you're paying yourself, and then
if you're raising capital, you got a boss. So
you answer to someone else?
Yeah. So even though you're a founder, it's a different thing.
That's a different thing, and we haven't. We've raised some capital, just friends and family capital, because
you didn't call me.
Yeah. Next one.
Gosh, so that's seed. Then I'd be Series A. I'm in.
It's it.
I'm in.
Right.
All right. No, I meant. Yeah, so you're a founder.
But that's the real difference is, when you pay the phone bill, you actually pay the phone bill.
Yeah. You look at the phone bill.
You pay the phone bill. I mean, you pay the rent. You write a check, you put your hand in your pocket, and you pay it. So that's the biggest change for me, because I've never worked for myself before. I came through, you could argue, sort of the corporate structure, even though there were some private companies and some public companies. There was never. I mean, I don't know how my phone bill at the office ever got paid before.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, at Raider Hill, when we started the company, I mean, this is actually before Joe had left DDR and came in. They shut off our phones because I just didn't pay the bill, and I didn't. And it's not because I got the bill and I didn't pay. It's just that I didn't even think to pay the bill.
It's never been part of your.
It's never been part of. I don't know. I don't know how the bills got paid from that perspective. So being a founder, is all those different things, and the risk is much greater personally, because you also have enormous brand risk, reputational risk. If you're going to start your own company, you don't want to lose, and if you bring on clients, people that are extraordinarily smart and knowledgeable about things that you don't know about, and things that you want to learn from them just as much as they want to learn from you. And it's got to be one of those good relationships, because otherwise you'll fail. Your clients need to be sticky clients. You can't be one and done because you didn't do a good job. The way to do well is to have clients that stay with you time and time. So you have to perform at a very high level. If you don't, it is a blemish on your personal reputation. And that is something that you work 35 years to build up, or 30 years to build up. And, we're now, I guess, in our 10th year at Raider Hill. And it took a long time to build a reputation, to get someone to pick up the phone to call you. And I didn't know that they would, by the way. I will tell you, the biggest concern I had, my sleepless nights were that people only called me because I was CEO of a big public company. Sure. And then all of a sudden you leave and you're sitting in a Regis office, and I don't know if they're going to call me. I don't even, you have no idea.
And a lot of people may not even start the venture because ignorance is bliss. It's like, I don't even want to start a company. I don't think financially you needed to. So it's why even put myself or subject myself to knowing whether I actually had real relationships, or they just called me because I'm the CEO of DDR.
That's right. And by the way, there are plenty of people who didn't call. Right there,
and you keep a kill list.
But there were a lot of people. But there were a lot of people. That
I know you did. I know you got the kill list. You got it up on your wall. I said, a lot of people wouldn't do what you did.
Yeah.
And yes, they would like to be a founder and know what that's like, and they'd like to. I mean, if there's a lot of enterprise value, Raider Hill make even more money. But people who've accomplished what you had accomplished by the end of your time at DDR, and Brixmor for that matter, and all the board positions, and respectfully had the financial. You were in the financial place you were at where, you don't have to work. Let's just put that lightly. They wouldn't have done it because of, they don't want to know. They don't want to know how good are they really, who's going to call, who's not going to call. Fear of failure. Mm-hmm. I have tremendous fear of failure. A lot of these conversations, that's a big driver. I picked up on something. It didn't prevent you from starting the company, but it certainly likely created motivation at a time in your life where, again, providing for your family is respectfully not a motivation anymore, right? Financial security is not a motivation. It's just like, I want to start my own company. I want to be successful. I want to do it with a partner. But how much was fear of failure a driver in those early years of Raider Hill?
Oh, it was significant. It was significant because, again, you are taking some risk. There's the financial side of the failure, which is fine. You got to be honest about it. That issue could have been absorbed if the company didn't work. Mm-hmm. But the reputational side, you work 30, 40 years to build a reputation in the business, and you've done some good things. And by the way, the business rewards you for those good things. So it's a win-win situation. And then you put yourself out there. It's a test. There's no question about it. It is a test, and it's something that you do every day, and it's something that drives us every day because we don't want to fail. And more importantly, we have obligations to others. We have people that left other companies that come work for us, that had good careers other places, and they came to work for us. I feel an enormous sense of obligation to not only give them security, but to give them wealth.
Now you do, because they left, which is very valuable and meaningful. Like, you don't want to let them down. Your teammates. It gets back to you being a football player, a lineman, which is in my experience around football, those were the most team guys. Right, because it's never about the offensive line. Right?
There's no glory in it.
There's no glory.
There's no glory.
Yeah, they only know your name if you get caught holding. Right?
Totally.
Oh yeah, I got a lot of offensive linemen in my family. So, but it's I want to ask, why did there's not a lot of people who've done what you've done, but there are a lot of people who've had very successful careers. They were a public CEO. Let's say thousands. Okay. They had lots of money. You're not probably the first person who had the idea like, oh, I'm going to go start my own company and be a founder. But you're one of the very few who did it. So I'm going to talk about you in the third person. Why did Dan Hurwitz do that, but most people don't?
I don't know. I can't really speak for them as to why they didn't.
I didn't just take a guess.
No, why they didn't.
Why are you a different animal?
First of all, like I said earlier, I like to build things. I like to start things. I like a project. My wife would tell you it drives her crazy to some extent.
That was going to be my next question. Hey, if I asked your wife, would she be like, I needed him out of the damn house?
Well, that's part of it, I'm sure.
Because he'll drive himself crazy. He's going to drive me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's no.
That might be the answer.
She was extremely supportive, and that's probably why. But I like to build things, and I need a project, and every now and then, and it could be a little project. It could be building a house.
Mm-hmm.
It could be.
You do that from time to time.
I do, but could just something different. And this was really different. This was really different.
It is different. I mean, we just walked the audience through your career. It's these big companies where you found a way to shine, okay, but it's not a startup. Quite the opposite.
Well, but you also listen. For me, I really love what I do. So I don't know what I would do if I wasn't working.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to go golf 4 days a week.
Not a golfer, huh?
No, and I just
you only go watch the Giants if they're in the Super Bowl.
That's right, and you get me tickets,
and I get tickets, yeah.
But I really don't know what I would do if I didn't have something else to do. I get bored very easily. Mm-hmm. So I need to do something, and I don't have a lot of hobbies outside of work.
No grandkids.
No grandkids yet, and I just wanted to stay in the business. I have a lot of friends in this business. I've made a lot of friends in this business. People that not just convenient business friends, people I genuinely like, and people that I really admire and respect, and I didn't want to walk away.
And like you said earlier, you're at a point where you get to choose the people you want to work with. Humbly speaking, if you get to work with people, generally speaking, that you like to work with.
My very first boss, I'll never forget, Arnold, I was working for the company about 6 months, and he took me out for lunch, and he said to me, they used to call me Junior because I was the youngest guy in the office. He'd say, Junior, do you like this business? I said, yeah, I really do. He goes, do you want to stay in this business? I said, yeah, I really do. He says, that's good. He said, I think you're going to do well. He said, and I think the business will be good to you. He said, but remember one thing. He said, because I'll be dead. So he said, remember one thing. He was 70 at the time. I was in my 20s. He said, by the time you're 50, you either have to have enough money that you don't care about anything, or you have to have your own company to control your own destiny. Because this business is not good to people over 50 who need a job. And he said, so enjoy your success now, work where you have to work, but by the time you're 50, you need to, and trust me when I tell you, you need to make a decision. Mm-hmm. And that decision is either you have enough walk-away money so you don't care, or do your own thing and control your own destiny if you want to stay in the business.
And by the time you're 50, you had enough money, and just to be safe, you started your own company.
And I thought the timing was good. I mean, I remember him and I remember during the course of my career over the
that stuck with you?
It stuck with me because I saw a lot of people that are exactly as he described. I mean, I was always surprised when I was 35, 36 years old, and I had people that were names I recognized calling us up looking for jobs, looking for work, 55, 60-year-old people who needed. And
you said,
I don't want to be that guy, you know. And he was the first to say, this is a young man's business, and, you know, young, aggressive people can come in here and displace, you know, older, more stagnant people pretty quickly.
Performers at a cheaper price.
That's right.
So why do you think you get that call from, and I'm just picking a number here, 55, looking for a job. Why do you think they were in that position? Why do you think they had not got to a place of having the wealth where they could walk away? Or founding a company is different. A lot of people, that's not for them. But just from a wealth, is it they just didn't grind hard enough to get to a place where they were being compensated, or they just didn't have the skills? Was it a God-given thing?
Well, I think in some cases people get very comfortable. You know, the business, as you get older, again, this industry treats you well. And I'm not talking, not everyone gets generationally treated well, but it does treat you well. And people are victims of their own circumstances, or they're victims of bad luck within their company, you know, and things happen. And I think there's a lot of people who misplace convenience for security. And I never did that. I always felt that, you know, that there was no company I've ever worked for that couldn't be just as successful, if not more successful, without me. And I really wanted to make sure that, you know, I went to work every day feeling very much like I didn't have a lot of security, and I had to grind it out and go to work.
So convenience for security.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that back to the mentality of someone. What is it about your mentality that, because convenience always sounds nice. It sounds nice to you. It sounds nice to me.
Yeah, it would
it's like
be
it's
nice.
like, you know, hitting the snooze button and the convenience of staying in bed. But what is it about your mindset and how you approach your life, your profession, pretty much everything you do, that never allowed you, in terms of self-accountability, allowed you to choose convenience over security?
I think it was just the way I was raised.
Okay.
You know, I didn't
Like,
come from
nature, nurture.
I think it's a little bit of both. You know, I'll never forget when, you know, I was doing pretty well, and my wife and I, we bought our first house, and my father sat me down and told me what an egregious error it was, and that we should be living in a townhouse and saving all of our money because it could all end tomorrow. You know, that was sort of the mentality I grew up in because
that generation that was a thing.
That was a thing, you know, and I also was fortunate enough to grow up with 4 grandparents and 2 great-grandparents, so who had been through wars and depressions and things of that nature. And it was just the nature of our family because we didn't come from a lot. So the nature of the family was that you by the grace of God, got up this morning and you move forward, but that could all end tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And that was always, you know.
So that's the nurture part.
That's the nurture part. I mean, in our family, I'll give you an example. My father, who had obviously great understanding of what happened in World War II and things of that nature. Was really a history buff. When we were little kids, he would not let us ever have our passport expire, because he would say, you don't know when you may have to flee. Tough way to live, but one of the biggest disagreements I ever saw my parents have, my parents never argued, was when he found out that my mother, I don't know why it was her responsibility, but whatever, allowed our passports to expire. Because what would happen if we had to flee the country? And think of all the people during World War II, particularly Jews in Germany and places like that in Eastern Europe, that died because they let their papers expire because they couldn't get out and things like that. So it's a tough way to live your life, and it's a tough. And I'm not I'm not advocating that kind of lifestyle, but because I didn't grow up the way he did.
Empathize how he did.
I can empathize how he did, and there was never a great sense of security. It was always keeping your head on a swivel. Don't stand around a pile, right? And in football, they say, don't stand around. Keep your head on a swivel. Well, that was my father's thing, and I think that's just the way I was raised. I think it was just you always keep your head on a swivel.
So that's nurture. You're raised always keep your head on the swivel, never take anything for granted. By the grace of God, you woke up this morning.
Appreciate everything.
And then the nature part. One of the first questions I asked, kind of describe you as a kid. Like, were you always, just driven, like just whatever you chose to do? And maybe you didn't do a lot, but like, were you just a really driven person?
I think I was. Again, I think my passions were somewhat limited. So, for example, academically, in things that I was extremely interested in, I was a very, very good student. And things I wasn't, I didn't do so well. So I think, although in high school it changed, I'm talking more early on. Athletics, whether it was football, lacrosse. I also played lacrosse. I mean, those were sports that I was very, very driven in. Other things I didn't care very much about. I'm not a great swimmer, but I didn't really care. So I think I picked my spots. And truthfully, real estate was one of those spots for me that I really liked. And I liked it because I liked the people. I mean, I remember when I was working on the construction site, when all the big shots used to come down, and this was in the 80s, so they had on their big Porsche sunglasses, and they were coming down in their three-piece suits and their limousines and everything like that. They could not be nicer to me, and I was basically running a labor crew. They could not be nicer to me, and I don't know why. And they would pull me in, and they would ask me questions, and they would treat me like a real human being. And I just remember thinking to myself, this is really, and again, I talk a lot about my dad, who's obviously a massive influence in my life, but he used to say to me, because I was going to leave, I was only going to do this for a year, and then I was going to go to law school. And he said to me, if you like the people, stay, because it's unusual to work with people you like. He said, and if these are nice people, stay, see what happens. So that's why I stayed, and here we are.
They didn't have this word back then, culture, but in the culture of the company or the group you're with, that must factor into job satisfaction.
It sure does. It sure does. And having and it impacts your effort too, because you really, really want to work hard for these people. You want them to be successful. These people were so kind to me, and they gave me so many great opportunities. I just, there was nothing I wouldn't do. There's no hour I wouldn't put in to help them be successful, because they were so kind and so nice and so fair with me.
What, if you had to look back, what would be something perhaps you'd do differently?
Well, I think there were times when I gave some people the benefit of the doubt that I should not have. Your gut tells you sometimes. I don't know if you ever read the book Blink.
Yes.
Well, if Malcolm Gladwell, right, and Malcolm writes about,
it's like your gut instinct,
a thick slice or a thin slice, and if you make decisions with a a thin slice, or do you wait to have more information and you sort
More
of your thick
information
slice?
oftentimes is
And
not better.
and I'm a thin slice guy, and I questioned myself too many times when my gut told me to do something, or my gut told me not to do something, or to be involved with someone, or to do a deal with someone, or et cetera. And I talked myself out of my gut feeling, and I think that's a mistake.
Is this about assets or people?
More about people.
Yeah.
More about people. I mean, I'll never forget. I was very fortunate to have dinner at a conference where I happened to be asked to sit at the table with Colin Powell, General Powell. He wrote a book, Colin Powell on Leadership, which is also a terrific book. And he talks about what Malcolm talks about in Blink, where he says, a great general needs between 30 and 70% of the information to make a decision. So you have to decide what kind of general you are. If you're a 30% general, people need to know that, and they need to get you 30% of the information. And if you have less than that, you probably don't have enough.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a 70% general, that's fine. But if you wait for more than that, you probably waited too long. And I'm a 30% person. And there were times when I was ready to act on that 30%. I talked myself out of it, and that was a mistake.
Does that the common refrain? Because I've asked this question, and it almost always gets back to, in summary, keeping people around longer that I knew either couldn't do the job, perhaps culture cancer, whatever.
Yeah.
Bad partner, bad teammate. Is that what you're getting at?
And that's part of it for sure. And that's the gist of it, is that you kind of knew this wasn't going to work, but you convinced yourself that it could. Mm-hmm. And you should have trusted your gut.
Kind of like not a savior, like I can save this, I can fix this.
Maybe he's not as bad as I thought. Maybe, this or that, or, maybe she's not what people have told me about her reputationally, et cetera, whatever it is. Or I can fix it. You have sometimes it's your own hubris that gets in the way and say, yeah, I know that was his problem, but I'll fix that. It won't be like that with me. And you realize you're just as human as everybody else, and you're going to suffer the same consequences as everybody else. But trusting my gut, it takes you a while to do that, because you're young and you're inexperienced sometimes, and you're insecure and you're not sure, and you want to do deals or whatever it might be. But that's probably, when I think back about the biggest mistakes that I've made, it's trusting people that I shouldn't have trusted, and I knew I shouldn't have trusted them.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Let me pivot here, because we're getting close to the end, y'all. Current economic conditions. I just want to ask you, what do you see going on in the current economy? Where are things headed? Looking for some guidance and advice here.
Well, obviously, we're in a weird time because there's the pressure of inflation. At the same time, we have very low unemployment and things of that nature. And although that will probably turn and unemployment will go up a little bit, but we are. I'm not a huge doomsday scenario person where I think we're headed for. Maybe it's because I just lived through the great financial crisis. I'm still not over it. I think I have post-traumatic stress disorder from my days back then. But I think we have to be realistic about where we are. You watch TV today and they talk about inflation, and everything else. The truth of the matter is there's only one statistic that matters when it comes to inflation, and that's wage. And I don't care, everyone talks about the price of milk or the price of gas or the price of eggs and all this other stuff. And that's very nice because they can run it on the news cycles 24/7 and get people all panicked. But the only thing, and you learn this, is people who are listening know this from Econ 101 or Business School 101, the only thing that really, really affects inflation is wage. And that's the one statistic that I watch. And I think it's by far.
If you give people more money, they're going to buy more things.
They're going to buy more things, and the price is going to go. I mean, it's pretty simple. So the wage inflation thing, and I think we're going to start to see that come down, and I think inflation will be under control. The thing that surprises me the most, and maybe it's because of my age and the time that I've spent in the business, we have always run this business where debt costs are roughly 200 to 250 basis points above the benchmark. And the people who are out there saying to us, interest rates are going to come back down, we're going to get back down, et cetera, we just need to get through this period. I'm really not sure what they're talking about. I really don't think that's going to be the case. I think interest rates are going to be higher for much longer than people are talking about. And I think as an industry, we just have to figure out how to operate our businesses at 200 basis points above the benchmark. Mm-hmm. Because it was that in the 70s, it was that in the 80s, it was that in the 90s. I mean, that's just where we run the business. And I don't see the 10-year, the SOFR or anything else going down to where it was. And those people who are hoping that it will, I think are going to be disappointed. So I think interest rates are going to stay up longer than people are currently anticipating. And not all people, obviously, just some people, yeah. but a lot. And I think that from a business perspective, if you're a consumer of debt, which most people in real estate are, you have to assume that your cost is going to be 200 basis points against the benchmark, and whatever, and that benchmark is going to be about where it is for a while.
So if 10-year treasuries are, I didn't look today, let's say 350. Okay, so your guidance is you're probably just down the middle of the fairway going to be borrowing at 5.5.
5.5 to 6, depending on who the sponsor is.
Generally speaking, just starting at stabilized deals, stabilized with debt constants, including amortizations, you're probably 6.5, 7s, maybe higher.
Yeah, that's about right. But that's not historically inaccurate.
That's sort of
where we are.
Years, yeah.
I get it. But those were good days.
We're seeing yields go up. We've seen them move, I'd say on average between 100 and 125 basis points in the last 6-7 months. It's just they have another 150 to go.
Yeah, I think
so. We're, just in terms of this price dislocation, it's.
But I think, at the end of the day, I know everyone likes to complain about this or complain about that, and et cetera. And there's a lot of, divisive politics that are involved in all this. There's a couple things that we got to keep in mind. One is, when we went through the COVID situation, whether it was this administration or the prior administration, there was no playbook for that. Everyone was doing the best they could, and the fact that we flooded the economy with capital at a time when people weren't spending it because they couldn't, and therefore their savings rate went up. Therefore, when the doors opened, we had massive inflow of capital.
Good time to be in retail, right?
Good time to be in retail. But, I mean, you got to be realistic. You can criticize all that.
Good time to be everywhere.
You can criticize all that now. But there was no really great playbook for how to handle that. And I think people did the best they could no matter what side of the aisle you're on. And I think the same thing is true, with Powell and the Fed. I'm not happy at all that the interest rates have gone up. It's terrible for our business.
Do you think they waited too long?
I don't. I mean, I think it was a situation.
What, do you have lunch with Powell in a couple of days? You gotta.
No, I just don't think any of us are really in a position to second guess it because they did the best they could. I think his intentions were good, but I also think we hadn't seen runaway inflation like that before.
Yeah. Right.
So we hadn't seen runaway. So there was really, again, no playbook for that exactly. In recent memory.
It's a tough spot to be in.
It's a tough spot to be in, and we'll muscle our way through it. And for those people who, have been around a long time, we go through this all the time. I mean, some sort of blip, recession, speed bump, whatever you want to call it. And you just put your head down, you go to work, you fight your way through it, and you do the best you can.
I wasn't around when Volcker, but Volcker's this folk hero. And I know Volcker in many ways is, my understanding is who Powell is looking to more or less model behavior, but everybody talks about him now, and puts him on a pedestal. But I'm sure when he was hiking rates, 600 bips, then down 400, then up 600, people were not happy.
At the time, he was a villain.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we'll see what happens. I think things are going to be tough. I think this is not going to be a great year. I think next year will also be a slog. Well, and we'll see what happens.
Let me ask you. So right now, at least in commercial real estate, I think this actually applies to a lot of industries, even outside real estate, but there's just such price dislocation and caused because this is very simple. Borrowing costs go up 300 to 400 basis points, and cap rates don't move right away. They never do. And they're moving up. They still have a long way to go. That's what we're seeing. But eventually cap rates do increase. Either unmotivated sellers get out of the market, motivated sellers respond to buyer pricing, and eventually the market resets and things get better. And this is the question I'm asking you, what now I'm starting to think through is the actual operating fundamentals of the product types. Like if we go into a recession, depending whether it's a soft landing, a hard landing, if there is increasing unemployment and wage growth does disappear, and retailers are going to feel it, industrial is going to feel it, multi is going to feel it without even touching office, but like to where you actually start to see vacancies rise and rents go back down. Even as cap rates are stabilizing, that creates a whole new second kind of punch to the gut for real estate. What are your thoughts on that happening, that deterioration of the actual income, the revenue, and talk to us about the four main food groups. We could start with office because it's the easiest.
Well, I think the problem we're all making when we talk about real estate is we call it just real estate. I don't know what that is. In the sense that, for example, retail, there's a very big difference between malls and open air. And there's a very big difference between power centers and grocery anchored centers in the open air environment.
Sure.
And there's a big difference between all that and street retail. And there's a big difference between that and outlets. So I think we have to start differentiating a little bit more. And when you read these articles or you hear people talk about retail, I'm not sure what they're talking about. Which segment of the retail world are people referring to? Because I think, to your point, which is a good one, every one of them is going to respond differently, right? The ones that are at moderate to budget price points tend to do okay.
Tend to do well.
Okay.
And necessity.
And necessity and things of that nature. So, but those that are maybe specialty and very high end, and if we still have contraction in the stock market and things of that nature, it could have an impact on luxury. You just don't know. So I think when people are looking to invest in real estate, or even to talk about it in more of a global way, we have to decide what we're talking about. I mean, office is a good example. Everyone's talking about office, right? Because office is sort of like the new retail, right? We joke about the fact that retail, finally, we're not last, right? There are people that
I think someone just closed a deal. Are they playing house music over there?
No, they're swinging the bell so hard. That's what that noise is.
Oh, man. Welcome to Matthews.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good sign.
Sometimes the inmates run the prison here.
Yeah, for example, there's a difference. There's a difference between suburban and urban office, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So I think that's the important thing. Listen, I think office has got a long way to go. It's going to be a very difficult business, and it feels a lot like the mall business did, like in 2015. When
there has to be,
when the CapEx was running high, rents were coming down, things of that nature.
And there was a lot of product in the mall space, and I think to your point to office that it just there is no future. Like it has to be put to pasture.
It's a little harder in office, particularly urban, right? I mean, if you go, there's not a lot you can do with that, and all this talk about conversion to residential is not so easy.
No, just the per square foot to convert, even if a city cities have to, unless they want, like, because you have these office buildings built in some cities, the 30s, the 50s, the 60s, the 80s, that are, I would say, functionally obsolete. It is going to be very hard to lease them. And so then they talk about conversion, and the math behind that doesn't pencil. So then the cities, in some way, might have to financially they create some sort of incentive, some sort of structure, and it's not a co-invest, but to make it pencil, and they don't have the money. And so the new glass towers, the Class A, floor-to-ceiling glass,
they're fine.
They're fine. They'll be fine.
Boxes.
Yeah.
The other thing is the shape of the buildings. It just doesn't lend itself to residential. Office buildings are a different shape than residential buildings. So I mean, there's a lot. So I think I'm probably ducking your question a little bit more than you want, but it's hard to put your arms around it because the balance sheets in retail, for example, are extraordinarily strong. They're stronger in the open air sector than they are in the mall sector. So if we're going to have economic compression in some way, is it going to hurt the malls more than the open air? Probably will. I mean, what's the strength of the tenant? Our business in retail and almost every business really runs on the credit quality of the cash flow.
And what about multifamily?
So multifamily to me is I like multifamily. I always have, and I continue to like multifamily. I think it did get a little ahead of itself. I can honestly say that there's some incredibly surprising results that were posted by some of the best public companies out there, and I think the growth and the rent, et cetera, was good. If we're going to start to see wage growth temper, if not recede to some extent, obviously that's going to have an impact on multi. But I still think multi is a safe sector if you get it at the right price. Don't forget, in our business, you make money on the buy. You don't make money on the sell. And if you overpay, you got a problem no matter what, and you can't get your way out of it. And if you get it at the right basis, you'll be fine, even in tough times. And I do think that multi is a good investment, just not quite at the price that it was.
If you had $1, a mentor of mine used to ask me this question. If you had $1, where would you invest it today? If you had $1 to invest, where would you invest it?
Company or sector?
Anything.
If I had $1, I would invest in Walmart.
No, there's the answer.
I would invest in Walmart.
All right. I'm going to put all my life savings in Walmart.
Well, that'll move the market. I've seen them navigate tough times before. I've done business with Walmart for almost 40 years. There are times when I've certainly counted them out, and the market's counted them out, and I've learned two things in my career. One is I never bet against New York and never bet against Walmart. And if
I knew the first lesson, I never bet against New York. I'm a big believer. We're opening our office tomorrow. I'm gonna fly up.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
But I think Walmart going into this cycle we're in is extremely well positioned to be a winner.
And for all the listeners, Dan is not talking his own book right now.
No.
This is a genuine opinion.
Yeah,
I think I can call it some financial advice here.
No, absolutely not. But they're a company that just continually impresses under the most difficult of circumstances.
Last question: when you look back on your career, it's a deep question. What is one adjective or word that you would hope in general people would use to describe you, Dan Hurwitz?
I think fair. I've always been an advocate of being fair with people, maybe to a fault, maybe too direct. Some people don't like that, but I mean it. It's sort of if I say it, it's sincere. I'd like people to think that I've been fair in my dealings, fair in my relationships.
Would you say that's treating people how they would like to have been treated?
Yeah, I think so.
Golden rule.
I think so. And then it doesn't always work. Sometimes you're fair and you think you're fair and they don't think you're fair, and I get it. But in general, I'd like to say that people think I'm a fair person and that I've treated them fairly.
Well, Dan, I can always say you have been more than fair to me. You've been one of my biggest supporters, and I'm extremely grateful for the support over the years and the fact you come into town and do this with me. I've very much enjoyed this conversation. I'm looking forward to our dinner tonight. We're going to break out a little nice wine and our trip to New York.
Looking forward to it.
And continued success and growth for you, your family, the Raider Hill family. And again, I just can't thank you enough. So thanks so much for coming on.
It's been an honor and a privilege, really. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
What you know about rolling down in the deep? When your brain goes numb, you can call that mental freeze. When these people talk too much, put that in slow